Good morning. Welcome to Books by Ivan. My name is Ivan and I read books. The video I uploaded yesterday was supposed to be out at 2 p.m. but it took 5 hours for YouTube to process the video somehow, which is unfortunate. But the video is now up and it pretty much introduces the book that I am about to read. Without further ado, this is The River in Between. Chapter 1. The two ridges lay side by side. One was Camino, the other was Mukuyu. Between them was a valley. It was called the Valley of Life. Behind Camino and Mukuyu were many more valleys and ridges, lying without any discernible plan. They were like many sleeping lions, which never woke. They just slept, the big, deep sleep of their creator. A river flowed through the Valley of Life. If there had been no bush and no forestry covering the slopes, you could have seen the river when you stood on top of either Camino or Mukuyu. Now you had to come down, even though you could not see the whole extent of the river, as it gracefully and without any apparent haste wound its way down the valley like a snake. The river was called Hanya, which meant cure or bring back to life. Hanya River never dried. It seemed to possess a strong will to live, scorning droughts and weather changes, and he went on in the same way, never hurrying, never hesitating. People saw this and were happy. Hanya was the soul of Camino and Mukuyu. It joined them. And men, cattle, wild beasts, and trees were all united by this life stream. When you stood in the valley, the two ridges ceased to be sleeping lions united by their common source of life. They became antagonists. You could tell this not by anything tangible, but by the way they faced each other. Like two rivals ready to come to blows in a life and death struggle for the leadership of this isolated region. It began long ago. A man rose in Mukuyu. He claimed that Gikuyu and Mambi sojourned there with Murungu on their way to Mukurue wa Kathenga. As a result of that stay, he said leadership had been left to Mukuyu. Not all the people believed him, for had it not always been whispered and rumored that Gikuyu and Mumbi had stopped at Camino? And had not a small hill grown out of the soil on which they stood, south of Camino, and Murungu had told them, "This land I give to you, O men and women. It is yours to rule until you and your posterity." The land was fertile. It was the whole of Kikuyu country, from one horizon embracing the heavens to the other hidden in the clouds. So the story ran in Camino. Spiritual superiority and leadership had then been left there. Camino had a good record to bear out this story. A secret grove had sprung out of the place where Gikuyu and Mambi stood. People still paid homage to it. It could also be seen by any who cared to count that Camino threw up more heroes and leaders than any other ridge. Mugo wa Kibiru, the great Gikuyu seer of old, had been born there, and he had grown up seeing visions of the future and speaking them to many people who came to see and hear him. But a few more cynical than their neighbors would not go to him. They called him an impostor. Then one night, when people were asleep, he vanished from the hill. He was soon heard of in the land beyond, in Yeri, Kiambu, Muronga, in fact, all over the Gikuyu country. And he still spoke aloud his message and cried, "There shall come a people with clothes like butterfly." These were the white men. Or, or was that great witch Kamiri, whose witchery bewildered even the white man, Amurenga. His witchery and magic, before he was overcome by the white man with his smile and gift, had won him resounding fame. He too, it is said, had been born at Camino. Like Mugu before him, he had disappeared from the hills to the country beyond. He could not be contained by the narrow life of the ridges. Another was Wachari, a great warrior who had led the whole tribe against Ukabi, Masai. As a young man, he had killed a lion by himself. When he died at the hand of a straying white man, he left a great name, the idol of many, a young warrior. The ridges were isolated. The people there led a life of their own, undisturbed by what happened outside or beyond. Men and women had nothing to fear. The Ukabim would never come here. They would be lost in the hills and the ridges and the valleys. Even the other Kikuyu, Nyeri, or Kiambu could not very well find their way into the hills, and so the country of many ridges were left alone, unaffected by the turbulent forces outside. These ancient hills and ridges were the heart and soul of the land. They kept the tribe magic and ritual pure and intact. There people rejoiced together, giving one another the blood and warmth of their laughter. Sometimes they fought, but that was among themselves and not outside of need ever known. To the stranger, they kept dumb, breathing none of the secret of which they were the guardians. Leaders of the land rose from there, for though the ridges were isolated, a few people went out. These who had the courage to look beyond their present content to a life and land beyond were the selected few sent by Murungu to save people in their hour of need. Mugo, the great seer, Wachuri, the glorious warrior, Kumiri, the powerful magician. They became strangers to the hills. Thereafter, the oilskin of the house was not for them. It was for those who lived inside. These were people whose blood and bone spoke in the language of the hills. The trees listened, moaned with the wind, and kept silent. Bird and beast heard and quietly listened. Only sometimes they would give a rejoiced, joyful applause or an angry roar. The hills and the ridge now lay behind. This was a plain, the only such level stretch of land in this country. If you strained your eyes and peered into the misty distance, you could see the land of Yukabi. It was all peaceful on this plain, which was said to have been field of battle long ago. A few cattle pulled and mauled on the grass, while others lay down, looking vacantly into space, chewing. Suddenly, two boys emerged from the bush. They began to fight. One was tall, and his unusual long neck and limbs made him appear older than he really was. He was Kamo, son of Kaboni, from Makuyu. The other Kinuthia was shorter with surprisingly strong muscle. His slow, wide eyes well matched his smooth forehead. He lived with his uncle at a village beyond the two ridges away from Mukuyu. His father had died early. At first, the boys fought with their stick they had gone to fetch from the bush. The green stick caught each other in mid-air several times and were soon in pieces. The boys threw them away and one piece touched the cow, which stood up quickly, frightened. It moved a few places from the struggling pair, walking to others on the way. Then it looked in the opposite direction, unconcerned with the fight. Kamo and Kinuthia were now wrestling. Their arms were interlocked, and the two boys went round and round without either getting the better of the other. Kinuthia tried to lift Kamo off the ground and then trapped him with his right leg. The attempt always failed. Kamo had his struggle too, though not usually voluble. Today he was eloquent with threats. "You will know who I am," he warned, at the same time using his right knee to hit Kinuthia's stomach. "Cow!" cried Kinuthia with pain. "Hyena!" Even you, Kinuthia hissed back. Kinuthia appeared much more collected, and an observer would have thought that he would win, but he tripped over a sharp stone as soon as and soon was lying prostrate on his stomach. Kamo bent over him and pinned Kinuthia's hand behind his head. His face was grim and contorted as he used his head to dig into Kinuthia's face, making his nose bleed. The boy underneath Kamo's knees felt pain. He thrust his leg in the air, hoping to catch Kamo by the neck between the leg. Blows fell on him, and he was bewildered, not knowing when or where the next move would follow. Two cows that had moved away together turned their head and watched the struggle for a while. Then they bent their heads, thrusting out a tongue to pull and maul the dross like the others. Just then, another boy came running from a group of cows a distance away. "Stop fighting," he shouted breathlessly as he stood near the pair. Kamo stopped, but he still sat on Kinuthia. "Why are you fighting?" "He called me names," answered Kamo. "He is a liar. He laughed at me because my father died poor and he called my father a convert to the white man." "He is, you beggar. White man's slave. You. Kamo became furious. He began to pinch Kinuthia. Kinuthia looked appealingly to the other boy. "Please stop this, Kamo. Didn't we swear that we of the hills were comrades?" He felt helpless. It was 3 days earlier that they had sworn to be brothers. "What do I care about comrades who insult my father?" asked Kamo. "I will do it again," retorted Kinuthia between tears. "Do now." "I will." "Try." Kamo and Kinuthia began to struggle. The boy felt an irresistible urge to fall on Kamo. He pulled a blade of grass and began to chew it, quickly, his eyes dilating with rage and fear. Camo, he burst out. The tremor of the boy's voice sent a quiver of fear up Camo. He quickly looked up and met the burning eyes gazing at him. Meekly, he obeyed the unspoken command, but his face went a shade darker than it normally was. He slunk away, feeling humiliated and hating himself for submitting. Kinuhia stood up unsteadily and looked gratefully at the boy. The boy kept on lowering his face, gazing at the same spot. The feeling of pride and triumph he had suddenly felt at seeing Kemo obey him had as suddenly subsided to one of regret in having done that to him. Perhaps it might have felt better if Kamo had stuck it out and he had to use force to remove him. The boy's name was Waiyaki, the only son of Chege. He was quite young, not of Kamo or Kibuya's, not of Kamo or Kinuthia age. He had not even gone through his second birth. Waiyaki was, however, already tall for his age. He had a well-built, athletic body. His hair was tough and dry, with kinks that finished in a clear outline on the forehead. Just above the left eye was a slightly curved scar. He had got from a wild goat. The goat had run after one of the herd boys. Seeing this, Waiyaki had taken a stick and run after the goat, shouting. The goat turned on him and jabbed him with his horn, tearing the flesh to the bone. His father arrived in time to save him. That was a long while ago. The wound had healed, leaving him a hero among the boars. Although he had run after the goat for sheer fun and enjoyment of the scene. That, however, was not the sole reason why the other boars, young and old, promptly followed him. Chege, his father, was a well-known elder in Camino. He had now only one wife, who had borne him many daughters, but only one son. The other two wives had died during the Great Famine without any children. The famine had been preceded by a very rich harvest. Then locust and worm and a long drought came to bring death to many. Chege had barely survived. His daughters were now well married, apart from one, who had died early. The other elders feared and respected him, for he knew more than any other person the ways of the land and the hidden things of the tribe. He knew the meaning of every ritual and every sign, so he was at the head of every important ceremony. Many stories ran around him. Some people said that he had the gift of magic. Others said that he was a seer and Murungu often spoke to him. And so they said that he could see vision of the future like Mugu wa Kibiro, who a long time back prophesied the invasion of Kikuyu, who a long time back prophesied the invasion of the Kikuyu country by the white man. Some even said that Chege was actually related to Mugu. Nobody knew this for sure. Chege himself claimed nothing. Ever since he had warned the people against Syriana Missionary Center and they had refused to hear his voice, he had talked little, keeping all thoughts to himself. Chege had told the people of the ridges what happened in Murenga, Nyeri, and Kiambu. He told them of Tumu Tumu, Gikuyu, Limuru, and Kijebe. They doubted his voice, saying, "How do you know?" "See them, the butterflies." "Butterflies? You have never left the ridge." "They are there, beyond the ridges, putting up many houses, and some taking the land." "How could you have seen the light beyond?" "Fools, fools," he muttered to himself in despair. Nairobi was already flourishing, and the railway was moving across the country in the land beyond where not many from the ridges had been, and they lowered their voice and whispered together, "The white man cannot speak the language of the hills." "And knows not the way of the land." But the white men had come to Syriana and Joshua, and Kaboni had converted. They had abandoned the way of the ridges and followed the new faith. Still, people shrugged their shoulders and went on with their work, whispering, "Who from the outside can make his way into the hills?" Chege had then been young. Now he was growing old. However, he remembered something in his old age. A light shone in his eyes, a flicker of hope. He will guard it and divulge the knowledge to none but the right one. The boys did not want to be caught by the darkness. They collected their cattle together and drove them home. Many paths ran through the forest to various huts scattered over the ridges. Unless you were careful, you could easily lose your way in the hills. One part of the forest looked so much like another, but the boys born and brought up in the hills knew the paths. Darkness was setting when Waiyaki reached home. Jake had been waiting for him. He got Waiyaki to his tinjara, the man's hut. He sat on a stool, leaning against the central pole. A fire burned low, and when Waiyaki entered and stood close to the door, Chege took a stick lying near him and poked the fire slowly. Sparks flew upwards in quick succession. "Why do you come home with darkness?" Chege at last asked without raising his head. He spat on the floor. "We took the cattle to the plains." "The plains?" "Yes, father." After a small silence, "This is far to go," he said. Waiyaki kept quiet. He was never at ease in front of his father. "Danger lurks in darkness." "Yes, father." Again, Waiyaki was uneasy. He darted a quick glance at the door. His father had not yet looked up. "Who showed you the way?" "I know all the way of the ridges," he said proudly to impress the father he secretly feared. Besides this, Waiyaki did not like to be thought young, for he considered himself able to make decisions like a man. Chege looked at his son. He contemplated him for a while. Waiyaki tried to puzzle what his father was thinking, and suddenly it occurred to him that his father had been anxious and had feared for him. A feeling of pride warmed his heart, and he wondered if the other boys could boast of such father. "You have not eaten." There was softness in Chege's voice. "I have just come." "Go then and get your mother to give you something to put in your mouth. You must be hungry." Waiyaki made to move, but as he was about to go, his father called him back. Waiyaki now trembles a little. "Remember, tomorrow is the day of your second birth." "Yes, father, do not forget." Jackie said with an unnecessary emphasis. Waiyaki ran to his mother's hut. How could he forget such an event? Deminam Methati were giants of the tribe. They had lived a long way back, at the beginning of time. They cut down trees and cleared the dense forest for cultivation. They owned many cattle, sheep, and goats, and they often sacrificed to Murungu and held communion with the essential spirits. Waiyaki had heard about these two generations of the tribe and he was proud of them. Only he wished he knew what they looked like. They must have been great and strong to have braved the hazard of the forest. Sometimes in the bush, he and the other boys played Demi na Matati. One day a boy from Konya told Waiyaki, "You cannot be Demi." "Why?" he asked. The other boy came round. "You're not ready for circumcision. You're not born again." Waiyaki looked at the ground and felt small. Then he turned to the group and let his eye fall on them. His eyes were large, but rather liquid, sad and contemplative. But whenever he looked at someone, they seemed to burn bright. A light came from them, a light that appeared to pierce your body, saying something beyond you, into your heart. Not a man knew what language the eye spoke. Only, if the boy gazed at you, you had to obey. That half imploring, half commanding look was insisting, demanding. Perhaps that was why the other boys obeyed him. His mother always turned her eyes away from his, and some women and big girls remarked that he made them feel shy, but then women were always shy when men's eyes were on them. Waiyaki was not aware of anything strange in his eyes, although sometimes he felt something burn in him, urging him to say and do daring things. And that day he felt the urge come to him. For a moment he thought himself Demi, as he answered back, "But I am Demi." And then he saw a tree a little distance away. "See if I don't cut down that tree," he went on. And he took an axe and rushed to the tree. Oblivious of everything, he began to cut with all his strength, and soon the stake that was the axe fell into pieces. At first the other boys had laughed, but they soon followed his example and went around cutting down trees and clearing the forest ready for cultivation, just like Demina Matati. That day, Waiyaki went home and told his mother, "I must be born again." Now the day had come, and when the sun rose and hit the ground and the goats stretched themselves against the wall, Waiyaki went to the back of the hut and let the rays fall on his back. The burning was pleasant. Waiyaki wanted to be happy, very happy. He was not going to learn the ways of the land. Was he not going to drink the magic ritual of being born again? He knew he wanted to be like his father, knowing all the ways of the land and knowing all the ways of the land from Agu and Agu long ago. But he felt rejected, but he felt dejected. Something he could not define seemed to gnaw at his soul. Having first crept through the flesh, he wished Kamo and Kimuthia were there to keep him company, and yet he had wanted this thing. As the sun shone on his skin, he held his muscled taut, and he held his muscles taut and shut his eyes, trying to recapture the feeling of importance he had experienced in the days of waiting. The anticipation had been sweet. Now it did not matter. Only after today he would be ready for the biggest of all rituals, circumcision. This would mark his final initiation into manhood. Then he would prove his courage, his manly spirit. Much beer had been brewed and many elders were beginning to arrive. Two had come early in the morning and were now busy slaughtering a goat. Everyone who was present would eat meat, and the spirits of the dead and the living would be invoked to join the ritual. The ceremony did not take long. It was not even complicated. His mother sat near the fireplace in her hut, as if in labor. Waiyaki sat between her thigh, a thin cord taken from the slaughtered goat, and tied his mother represent the umbilical cord. A woman old enough to be a midwife came and cut the cord. The child began to cry, and the woman who had come to wait for the birth of a child shouted in joy. For a time, Waiyaki forgot himself and thought he was Demi, bravely clearing the forest, a whole tribe behind him. But when he looked around and saw a woman surrounding him, he began to cry again like a little child. He felt the pain of fear inside him. He tried to open his eyes wide, and for a moment, he had a flashing, maddening sensation that it would not open. He trembled and thought himself shrinking with cold. He had never felt this before, and just continued flowing to the ground. The woman went on shouting, but Waiyaki did not see them now. Their voices were a distant burst like another. He had heard in a dream when a swarm of bees came to attack him. He cried the more. People became frightened. This was not what usually happened. Later in the day, his mother went into the field. Waiyaki, whose head had been shorn of hair, trailed behind her as a little child would follow his mother. And when she went to Hanya River, he followed. She dipped into the water and he came out clean. She dipped him into the water and he came out clean. He went to bed early. A strange hollowness settled in his stomach. The whole thing had been a strange experience. He was glad that the ceremony was over, but somewhere a glow of pride was beginning. He was ready for initiation. Soon, Waiyaki joined again in the daily rhythm of life in the village. He went out to look for cattle, organized raids, went out hunting. He joined in the dances for the young boys and felt happy. Days came and went, and still it was the same life. His eyes retained a strong and resolute look. Some people said that there was something evil in their glitter. His father must have had some sort of eyes. But his father must have had the same sort of eyes. In a body becoming distorted with wrinkles, his eyes remained alive and youthful. One evening, a few weeks after his second birth, Waiyaki was called by his father, who liked holding talks in his thingira, the man's hut. Waiyaki entered very quietly, because he was always uneasy in the presence of his father. Chage was sitting in his usual place by the pole. Goats and sheep slept together around him, and a low snore came from them. "Sit down," Chage said, and indicated a small four-legged stool, standing legs upward near a fat sheep, which slept very close to the fireplace. Waiyaki poked the sheep in the ribs with the left leg so that he might get a place to sit. The sheep would not move, and Waiyaki was forced to sit next to it. "Where do you take the cattle tomorrow?" "The valley in Yama." "Have you been to the hills deep south of Camino?" Chege spoke slowly, except for a slight tremor in his voice. It was young and calm. No, Waiyaki answered, after a slight pause. He was trying to recall the place. He wondered why his father was asking him all this. Have you ever heard of the sacred grove? Yes, we hear about it. There was another silence. Waiyaki grew restless and Waiyaki grew restless with curiosity. Leave the cattle and goats with your mother, for tomorrow we shall go to the hills. Outside it was dark. A few stars lay scattered across the sky. Waiyaki was excited. He felt ready to start on the journey. There and then. What were they going to go to? What were they going to do together? What were they going to see? It was a secret, a man's secret. What other hidden things did his father hold in his aging body? He wished Chege had told him more, but he will know all, everything tomorrow. It would be a great day. The journey was important. As he ran into his mother's hut and sat down, he felt important and very big. Chege and Waiyaki trudged on. The path they followed was unknown to Waiyaki, as he had never gone that far along Hanya River. But he was content to follow his father, who led the way through the labyrinth of bush thorns and creeping plants. Waiyaki was often caught in the network of plants and thorns, sometimes extricating himself with difficulty. Nothing stirred. Only a throb and fall of the river accompanied the occasional splash and slither of their footfalls. Sometimes Chege would stop and seem to listen. Waiyaki stopped too, but would hear nothing. Chege would then pour a shower of saliva onto his breast in the Gikuyu way of blessing. Waiyaki thought his father was blessing the river. Few words passed between them, but then Chege stopped near a certain tree or bush. Waiyaki knew that his father had something to explain. The bark on that tree is good for a fresh wound. The roots of this plant are good. When your stomach bites you, you boil them in water. Drink the liquid. And sometimes it would be warning against the trees, whose fruit is full of poison. Waiyaki felt close to his father as he had never felt before. He felt a glow rising inside him. Was he not drinking from the calabash of trust and responsibility? Titaru of a truth. He was maturing. The hidden things of the hills were being revealed to him. They left the valley and began to climb up the slopes, past a rock, here or tree there. Waiyaki was surprised at his father, who seemed to keep the same pace, while he himself was already panting. Once it disturbed an antelope from its hiding place. It leaped, leaped away. Waiyaki liked antelopes. He always felt a desire to touch their smooth body. They see men and run away. Why don't they run away from women? Waiyaki asked puzzled. The forest was quiet. One could still catch a fading puff on the river. You don't know this. Long ago women used to rule this land and its men. They were harsh and men began to resent their hard hand. So when all the women were pregnant, men came together and overthrew them. Before this, women owned everything. The animal you saw was their goat, but because the women could not manage them, the goats ran away. They knew women to be weak, so why would it fear them? It was then Waiyaki understood why his mother owned nothing. They came to the top. There, they found a beaten path which appeared to have been out of use for a long time. They took it. Ahead of them was a small hill standing all by itself. Once was a secret place. Waiyaki heart gave a jump. He felt afraid and excited at the same time. A big mugumo. A big mugumo tree stood near the edge of the hill. It was a huge tree, rich and thick and mysterious. Bush grew and bush grew and bowed reverently around it. And there the ancient tree stood, towering over the hills, watching, as it were the whole country. It looked holy and awesome, dominating Wayaki's soul, so that he felt very small and in the presence of a mighty power. This was a sacred tree. It was a tree of Marungu. Waiyaki now, on top of the hill, on the other side of the tree, surveyed the land, and he felt as if his heart would stop beating, so overcome was he by the immensity of the land. The ridges were all flat below his small feet. To the east, the sun had already risen. It could not be seen clearly. A huge red ball of smoldering color. Strands of yellowish red, thin outwards from the glowing center, diffusing into the thick gray that joined the land to the clouds. Far beyond, its tip hanging in the gray clouds, was Kirinyaga. Its snow-capped top glimmered sadly, revealing the seat of Murungu. The ridges slept on. Kemino and Mukui were no longer antagonistic. They had merged into one area of beautiful land, which is what, perhaps, they were meant to be. Mukuyu, Kamino, and the other ridges lay in peace, and there was no sign of life, as one stood on the hill of God. And with the last sentence, this will be all for today. I hope you guys enjoy, and if you have any thoughts, let me know in the comments. That is, if you manage to stay to the very end of the video. With that being said, my name is Ivan. This was The River Between. As always, have a good day and be good people. Bye.